going on, people? Today we're going to be talking about the new Constellation and some Coliseum, which we haven't done in a while, but it is actually pretty interesting, the Constellation that we have this week. So we're going to go ahead and talk about it and show you exactly how it all works and what best heroes to use for this week, whether you're free to play, pay to play, etc. Also, if you check out my comment section, there will be a link there to a video that I did with Amazon, so if you can go ahead and check that out, I'd highly appreciate it. So let's take a look at this Constellation, right? We have light-based or maniacs boost defense and magic defense by 75%. Now, a lot of people may not know exactly how that would work, especially when it's just based off the percentage. Well, if you go ahead and take a look at, let's take a look at maybe Child of Light, right? If you take a look at Child of Light and you go over to the basic attributes and you actually expand on it, it'll give you the breakdown on his defense, magic defense, all of his stats, right? All the stats that are going to be important for this hero. Now, if you take a look at Child of Light specifically, you'll see that his defense is a little bit lower than his magic defense, but if you compare his stats to other tanks, you'll see that he's pretty well rounded, meaning that he's not really that much favorable against physical or magic, etc. It's fairly close. Now, if you take a look at another hero that's going to be benefiting from this boost, and that would be Barbarian, you'll see that his defense is actually fairly high. It's almost 800. And not only that, his HP, which also matters quite a bit, especially when you're talking about tanks, is actually much higher than Child of Light. So you got 28,000 and 500, let's just say 600 defense compared to 34,000 HP. That's 6,000 higher, and defense of almost 800. That makes a big difference. Now, when it comes to planning stuff out, you also got to be aware of the heroes that you are using. So if you take a look at the team that I have on defense, it does include a Witch Stall. And if you take a look at Witch Stall and what it actually does, let's take a look. You go over to the hero skills, and Starlight increases defense of all allies by 150. Meaning that now when you go back and you take a look at Child of Light and you add that 150 defense on top of what he already has, it means that Child of Light is actually going to be fairly even 1-to-1 defense to magic defense. So Child of Light is going to be the best overall tank this week just because he is going to be very, very even. Another one that goes without saying is Rose Knight, but I mean Rose Knight is just good in general, right? The only thing that Rose Knight has against her is that her HP is a bit lower than most tanks, at only still like below 25,000, which is fairly low. Her defenses are pretty decent, but the magic defense is where she really excels, and that's why Rose Knight, generally speaking, is best as an off tank, meaning not really your only tank. But still, she's going to be able to do really, really well, especially against magic heroes. So let's go ahead and talk about this week, right? So we got light base and maniacs. So if you take a look at all of the ones that we have here, and we just go off of not just the tanks, but also the ones that are going to be doing damage. We have Chaos Dragon, but as we all know, Chaos Dragon is not really the best because a lot of times what he lacks is really damage. So this Constellation is not really going to be doing too much for him. If it was a Constellation where it would actually up his damage, then I could see him being used more. But in a Constellation that's just making him live a little bit longer, doesn't really help his damage, doesn't really do too much for him. Now, Master Cook is an interesting one because Master Cook has already really high damage and stuns and everything going for him. But what really undersells Master Cook a lot of times is that he dies fairly easy. So, when you think about having higher defense and magic defense, Master Cook is going to be one of those heroes that if you have him, it's going to do really, really well. The other one I want to talk about is Dream Witch, because Dream Witch is actually fairly good, but the problem with Dream Witch a lot of times is that she has this ability that does damage over time. Let me see if I can find it here. Is it this one? Yeah, so it says ignites the deepest sphere of all targets, dealing damage to all enemies, along with magic damage for 4 seconds. So it deals 650 magic damage, also deals 863 magic damage per second. Now you might think you know, on paper that sounds really good. It does damage to all enemies, doesn't matter where they're at. It does damage over time, and it sounds great. The only main issue with this is, in actuality, what this does is it makes the whole opposing team proc much faster, their ultimate abilities. And the damage that it actually does is not that good in order for you to be, okay, yeah, the whole team can go ahead and proc, no problem. So that's the main issue that Dream Witch runs into, is that a lot of times she'll just make the whole team proc their ultimates faster than you. And a lot of times that can be a nightmare. Literally, no pun intended, but kind of. And it's a nightmare for you and not the enemy. So it's one of the main reasons Dream Witch doesn't really get used as a healer. Because her heals are not really that great. And she also makes the enemies proc way faster. So it's not great. And now, of course, we have a couple of other heroes here, like Goblin, we have Trickster, and then also you have Jonas. Again, these heroes are not ones that you're going to be using much. Bomb and Goblin, you can see if you're lacking damage, especially magic damage. Bomb and Goblin would pair well with Child of Light, especially if you're free to play, because Child of Light does allow Bomb and Goblin to do more damage. If you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean once I remember where these heroes are. So if you take a look at Holy Judgment, this is an ability that he has that deals damage, magic damage, and also reduces magic defense by 240. So it pairs well with Bomb and Goblin and a hero like Jonas, etc. if you have them. So if you're going to be using Child of Light and you want to also experiment with Bomb and Goblin, you can do that. It's just that Bomb and Goblin a lot of times doesn't do a lot of damage, and so it's kind of meh. And the other really big thing with Bomb and Goblin is that he doesn't really offer much as far as like stuns and interrupts and things like that. So kind of lags behind in that department. But outside of that, the team that I would recommend for you guys, if you have the team, is the one that I was just using not too long ago. This one right here. It's going to be a very solid team. You have Child of Light as your main tank, and he's going to have those defensive boosts. And not only that, Child of Light brings a lot to the table. He brings a lot of stuns. He also brings more magic damage for opening up with Witch Doll. And so it just kind of opens up the whole team. And this team right here is very well executed. Now, the only thing that I think this team would really struggle against would be like a Don Guapo composition that's well done. Because if the Don Guapo gets over here to your Dream Witch, I keep calling it Dream Witch, Witch Doll, it can cause some issues because there's really nothing on this team to penetrate their side. So it kind of counts on you to be able to take down their tanks. And so it's not really the greatest. If you're going up against a team that's more physically oriented, you know, maybe it has like Grove Guardians, you know, Black Crow, etc., right? Then you can sub this one out and you can go with Barbarian, because like we mentioned, Barbarian is definitely more defensive as far as physical defense, and Barbarian is more offensive. So against Don Guapo teams, I think Barbarian might do a little bit better, just because you're going to have a little bit more offensive production, and you're going to be able to defend it a little bit better. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that this team is actually not very good against Don Guapo teams, just in general. Because, well, I'll show you what I'm talking about. With Don Guapo, he'll penetrate your back line, and you have no way of attacking their back line. This team kind of focuses on making sure that you get through their tanks, and if you don't do it, and there's a Don Guapo, he's going to penetrate your back line. He's going to make all your heroes kind of stay in one spot, and that's going to be a very bad thing for you, because then you're going to be far away from their back line. And of course, their back line, you see what it is, Petite Devil, Witch Doll, etc. They're just going to eat you alive slowly, or just not let you, take out their Rose Knight eventually. So this team kind of loses hard to Don Guapo. Now, if that's the case, you can try to use like Centaur, but the problem with Centaur, especially with this team like this, is that Centaur has very low magic defense, like 187, I think it is. It's very low. It's very low compared to other tanks. So he's basically just like a physical tank, and not even a good one at that. But he excels at stopping Don Guapo at that initial charge. But I don't recommend using a team like this against a Don Guapo, just because Don Guapo is actually going to be very, very hard to take down just because of the backline. So in that case, what I would suggest, especially if you're free to play, you can always try the full damage, like 100% full damage. But also keep in mind that with the boost to Rose Knight, you might have an issue taking down Rose Knight in a timely manner. So that might also not work very well. But what's the other free-to-play hero that I wanted to use here? Was it Death Archer? I feel like I'm missing one. Hold on. Oh, it was Incinerator. Incinerator is the one that actually goes really well with this. And so we're going to go ahead and try this out and see how it goes. But just know that this is kind of risky, especially against the Don Guapo, because the Don Guapo is not really the biggest concern, although he's an issue, but he'll go down fairly easy like this, right? The biggest concern is how fast this Rose Knight can or will go down. If they go down, like it's a big if. So, oh, this might actually be... Okay, so we kind of lucked out there. Well, maybe not, because they're still kind of doing damage here, huh? Oh my goodness. Okay, so there you go. That was kind of a little iffy. It's those stuns kind of be a little meh. But if you're free to play and you have this team will do very, very well against like Don Guapo squads. If it's against one tank only, that would actually do very well. But just know, as far as defense, or if you find yourself going up against a team like this, whether it's with Child of Light or anything regarding like this, a good Don Guapo squad with like a Witch Doll, Petite Devil, etc. is going to do really, really well, because that's where these teams struggle. Now, if it's not a Don Guapo, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find one that doesn't have a Don Guapo. Okay, this is more of offensive threat, like physical offensive. So in this case, what I like to do is I'll go with the more physical style one. There you go. They have no healer, so even though I'm going more offensive, I do have ways to heal myself. And the biggest threat on their team is going to be that Demon Slayer. That Demon Slayer dies, they die. That Rose Knight dies, they die. So this is one of those constellations where your team offensively, it's going to be very important when you pick them, because some teams are very strong, but they have their obvious weakness, like the one that I was just showing you guys. Okay, there you go. Okay, and since they have no heals, they're going to be struggling here. Once I get my heal off here, we're good to go. See, Child of Light there might have gone down just because Barbarian has more HP and has more defense. So you see Barbarian was kind of low health. That means that Child of Light probably would have gone down there, whereas Barbarian was actually able to survive it. And that's where you kind of weigh in, like, okay, do I go Barbarian? Do I go Child of Light? And that all is going to depend on the opponent that you're actually going up against. But yeah, just keep in mind that in Constellation, especially this week, there is no like best team out there, because every team will have a weakness. Like this one has a weakness to Don Guapo, and you have the Barbarian team that would be a little bit more weaker to Magic and all that. So you can have a defensive team that do well, but if your opponent knows how to exploit it, you're probably not going to do that well. But as long as you know the weaknesses and you know how to exploit your opponent's weaknesses, then you'll be fine. But yeah, hopefully this helps. Let me know if you guys want to see some more Coliseum videos or just some more Coliseum battles in general. At this point, I'm still kind of low on the ladder. Low or high, I don't know, depending on how you look at it. Because of migration and whatnot. So I don't really have like the top 10 fights, top 50 or whatever, like where the teams are really, really solid. But eventually we'll get there, I suppose. But yeah, appreciate you guys for coming through. And until later.